What's happening, y'all? Welcome inside the Fantasy Stock Exchange. Danny and Bush coming at you with the first rookie mock draft of the offseason. I know you guys have probably seen way too many rookie mock drafts by now. We've been slacking a little bit. We've been digging into these players. We like to, watch them and get our full informed opinions. We've already had the NFL Combine now, so we're starting to get a full grasp of how this, rookie cycle is going to shake out, how these mock drafts are going to shake out. We're going to do this from a Superflex format right now. Next week or sometime, in the future, nearby future, we're going to do a one quarterback one for those of you guys who play in one quarterback leagues. But this one will be a one round super flex rookie mock draft. And we'll obviously do some more multiple round stuff in the coming weeks as well.
Yeah, again, as Corey just mentioned, basically, we're going to delve more deeper, if you will, into these rookie mock drafts throughout the cycle. We just kind of want to give you guys as much context as possible before just talking about a player. We didn't just want to come on here and talk about a guy we had no clue about. We wanted to take as much information in as possible. And, we were watching a couple mock drafts on YouTube the other day being like, yeah, let's go perfect this.
Yeah, exactly. I know a lot of people are going to do mock drafts just with other people's ideas in mind. I don't like to do that. I like to watch the player, form my own opinions. And, obviously we've seen the combine now too. So we have that kind of athleticism piece of the puzzle to go off of. So without further ado, if you guys enjoy this video, hit the like button, comment any of your thoughts down below, subscribe to the channel if you are new. I know mock drafts usually bring in a lot of newer people. So if you guys want individual videos on these players, most of these guys have a tail of the tape. So if you go to the playlist tail of the tape on our channel, you can go watch like a 20-minute video in depth on each of these guys. Chris Olave and, a couple other guys that are going to be probably towards the tail end of this mock will be coming out in the next coming weeks. So just stay tuned for those. But without further ado, let's hit the intro. All right, so we are starting the draft here. Danny's going to be picking at the first pick. Like I said, if you guys missed the intro, this is a one-round Superflex mock draft for, rookies only. So obviously there's going to be a large tier of players at the top, in my opinion, in your opinion. Who are you going to go with the 101?
Yeah, and again, if you guys have watched our Dynasty decisions recently, if you've watched us really talk about this quote-unquote top tier that we view in the rookie drafts, there's a tier of about 5 guys that myself and Corey, depending on the landing spot, depending on draft capital, can all reasonably say can be the first overall pick in these rookie drafts. The one that I'm actually going to go for here is a guy that has been talked up by so many NFL teams, is looking to be a top 15 to 20 overall pick in the NFL draft, maybe even higher, given the hype that we've seen from this guy. And that's actually going to be Malik Willis, quarterback from Liberty. When I'm looking at Malik Willis, I understand all the concerns that realistically a lot of film guys have with him, in that, he's not great under pressure. He's not the most accurate with a defender in his face. But when I'm looking at Malik Willis, I don't care how good of a real life NFL quarterback he is. I care about how many fantasy points he can score for me. And I care about the draft capital here. When you're looking at Malik Willis here, you're talking about a guy with a howitzer of an arm that is a top 3 or 4 rusher in the NFL today. If he were to take a snap in the NFL today, he'd be a top 3 or 4 rusher with the likes of Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, and Jalen Hurts. He has the legitimate upside to break fantasy football once he becomes a starting NFL quarterback. And that level of upside, that level of sheer value range that you can accumulate when you take Malik Willis, can I say that there's a plausible chance for anybody realistically in the class, aside from Malik Willis, to be a top 10 pick within the next couple years in dynasty startups? I can't really make a plausible case for it. With Malik Willis, you mentioned it, the feet, the arm, the expected draft capital, all of it is there for a fantastic fantasy football prospect.
Yeah, and you mentioned Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts was the quarterback 1 in fantasy football before he suffered the injury that he, was suffering. And I don't think any of us feel much better about him as a passer than we did, his rookie season, the few games that he started. So you don't need to be a real, good NFL quarterback to be very productive in fantasy if you're running the ball, 10 to 12 times per game, which is what I think Malik Willis will be doing at the next level. And this is basically just Jalen Hurts with first-round draft capital and potentially very high first-round draft capital. By all accounts, what we heard at the Combine, NFL Network, the way that they were covering the Combine made it seem like, Kenny Pickett and Malik Willis are the 2 quarterbacks that are going to hear their names called very, very early on, April 28th. So I'm going to go operate under that assumption. the quarterback position is the most valuable in Superflex formats. It has the most longevity. It's going to hold insulated value for a very long time. Even if Malik Willis has a bad rookie season, like the likes of, Zach Wilson and Trevor Lawrence, he's still going to be a top 15, top 20 at minimum dynasty quarterback going forward, assuming he gets first round draft capital.
Well, the way I look at it here is, I think he's the same prospect as a Trey Lance? No, I think Trey Lance was a better prospect last year. But you talk about the situation. Trey Lance was a top 5 pick. Maybe Malik Willis sneaks into the top 5. He's probably more so a top 15 pick. But that's the blueprint for the investment that we're spending in Malik Willis. Trey Lance started, one game last year, but had a couple highlights where he had an 85-yard rushing performance where he showed off the juice with his legs. And now he's a top 15 overall startup pick. People generally overestimate how good a rookie quarterback has to be from a pure NFL standpoint in his rookie year. Like, we're looking at it right now. Mac Jones versus Trey Lance. It's not even really close. And it's sad because Mac Jones had the best real-life season of any rookie quarterback, but Trey Lance is always going to go higher because of that rushing upside and because of that draft capital that we see. That is the exact same bull case for Malik Willis.
Right. And if you don't like that, then you should play in a league that values rushing and passing yards the same and is a 6-point per passing touchdown type of format, because it's true. Rushing quarterbacks mean a lot more to fantasy football. Without further ado, though, I'm going to go to the running back position for the 102. I'm going to take Breece Hall. Breece Hall, this was not my running back one coming into the combine. I thought Breece Hall, when I watched his film, I had a couple concerns. One, he seemed a little bit long. He seemed like he was, 6'1", which is what he was listed at, and like 210, 212 pounds or something like that. And as a result, I had question marks about his contact balance, about his physicality. And I still do have those questions to some degree, which is why he's not like a first round graded running back for me. But his ability to win with athleticism was very on display on his film, but I didn't know how good of an athlete he actually was. Clearly, he's a very good athlete. I'll throw his math bomb, picture on the screen right now. This was a guy that ranked as a top 10 running back since 1987 in terms of his relative athletic score, from his size to the jumps that he put up, to the, agility, or not the agility drills, the 40 time that he put up, weight adjusted speed score, all that stuff in the 90 plus percentiles. I'm sure he would have had really good agilities had he done the agility drills as well. So this is a guy that has firmly entrenched himself as a top 3 overall, Superflex rookie pick. In my opinion, it all depends on what your team needs, I suppose. At the top of the draft, if you need a quarterback, take the quarterback. If you're, looking for a long-term rebuild type of situation, let's say you own a lot of the top picks and you're just looking for the long-term asset, I would still take Malik Willis over Breece Hall. But Breece Hall, if you happen to have the 102 and you're a win now team or in a position to contend in the next 2 seasons, I'm going to go with Breece Hall probably as either the 101 or 102, depending on what your team needs. But Breece Hall firmly entrenched himself as the top running back in this class. And I do think he has solidified himself in that tier with those top 3 wide receivers and Malik Willis.
Yeah, I mean, I agree here. I mean, when we were looking into the combine, we were looking before the combine. If you were to tell me after the combine that Breece Hall was going to be a sub 4.4 runner with the athleticism, the jump numbers that he was able to put up, I would have completely questioned the guy that I watched on film. Because genuinely speaking, I mean, you did the full breakdown for him. I've seen obviously a few games of him as well. And that elite athlete that he showed at the combine, I just didn't think he had in him. And I mean, kudos to him because he tested like an absolute madman and definitely opened my eyes to wanting to rewatch this guy because, man, like he tested legitimately as an elite level athlete, as an elite level running back, as some of the best running backs we've seen in the NFL coming out recently. Breece Hall is in that type of bucket for combine athleticism type of performance. And when you're talking about this guy, yeah, could he be more physical? Sure. But when you're a 4.39 runner at 217 pounds with prototypical NFL size and a full resume of both college production and college receiving, like it's tough not to take this guy in the top 5 at minimum. And I do think 102 here, given the expected draft capital you should see in the NFL, is well worth the pick. I'm going to have a hard time ranking this guy outside of my top 6 or 7 dynasty running backs as soon as he enters the league.
Yeah, that's the other thing that's a side benefit of testing that well and performing that well, as well as in the interviews. It sounds like he was all business guy that was, I'm the best running back in this class. It's really not that close. He showed why it's not that close on the field. I don't want to completely count out Isaiah Spiller, but we all knew that Breece Hall was going to out-test Isaiah Spiller anyways. And if Isaiah Spiller comes out at his pro day and runs 4.53, which is a good time for him, it's a pro day number, so you got to take it with a grain of salt. He's probably not going to, jump the same. We already saw him jump and it wasn't good. So Brees Hall has solidified himself as a top running back, both in fantasy circles and I think for NFL teams. He has a legitimate shot of going at the end of the first round, early second round of the actual NFL draft as well, which will complete his kind of, superstar prospect profile. If he goes in the first round, it's curtains. He's going to be the 101 or 102 guaranteed.
Well, it's funny because we were talking off the record, for those of you watching right now. Me and Corey were talking off the record, and we were thinking, like, what's his like most like realistic comp that's come out recently? And the one that catches our eye is a more athletic, better receiving profile version of what Rashad Penny was a couple years ago. And Rashad Penny, by PFF, was the most elusive running back in the NFL last year, as we saw going into this recording. Like, Rashad Penny was phenomenal, and I think Brees Hall is an A+ version of what Rashad Penny was as a prospect.
Yeah, exactly. The production was way better for Brees Hall. He was a lot younger coming out of school. He wasn't a senior like Rashad Penny was coming out of school. He's got the same type of size profile. Doesn't have the injury history that Rashad Penny has. So I think that is a pretty decent comp. And I changed my original comp was Damian Harris for Brees Hall because it was a guy that was not quite the best through contact, but was very elusive, was very fundamentally sound as a running back. But Brees Hall is just far too good of an athlete for me to compare him to Damian Harris, who's like an average athlete at the position. So moving off of Brees Hall at the 102, let's get into the 103, which is what you're on the clock with. Let's see what you go with. I think there's a couple of receivers that'll probably hear their names called here.
Yeah, the next tier for me are like same tier, but the rest of the tier for me is going to be Burks, Wilson, and London. And man, my pet catch is Treylon Burks. Watching this guy play, I mean, everybody's going to throw around the Debo comp, and it's way over exhausted at this point. But yeah, I get it. He didn't test the way some people thought he would. Some people thought he was going to go out there, he's going to run 4.4 flat, was going to jump out the gym, was going to be the best athlete on the field. He did not have that type of workout. I fully understand that. Heck, if you flipped him and Brees Hall's workouts, it probably would have made more sense going into the draft or going into the combine cycle for me. But when you're talking about Treylon Burks, what he's able to do with the ball in his hands, you simply can't teach. And a lot of times we like saying, oh, yeah, well, like, can they separate? Like, can they do this? Yada, yada, yada. And yeah, Treylon Burks can do all those advanced things. But at the end of the day here, sometimes it's just simple as if the guy has the ball in his hands, can he make plays? And Treylon Burks, to me, is the best in his class when the ball is in his hands at just being able to make a play, at just being able to erase angles, at just being able to run through contact, at just being able to be that physical mismatch on the field that no defense can really account for. And again, it's lazy to throw out the Debo comp because Debo is probably the best player in the NFL with the ball in his hands. But that's the type of mold that you're seeing here. Teams like the Jets, teams like maybe if he falls far enough given the poor combine, the Dolphins could use that. Teams that are creative and able to get the best attributes out of Treylon Burks, which are, quite frankly, elite attributes, he could be well worth a top 25 overall startup pick when it's all said and done, given the athletic profile, given the production, given the size, given his analytical profile, given everything at hand here for Treylon Burks. As long as he goes in the first round, which I think is pretty sure at this point. I mean, like, I just don't see him falling out of the first round. He's going to be a top 5 rookie pick.
Yeah, I think there's a couple. The benefits of having, a poor combine in some people's eyes is the fact that he's probably going to go to a better team now. Yeah. He might go to the Chargers at 17. He might go to, the Bucs at 27 or something. Like, if he goes to those teams, like, those coaches and those staffs will know how to use a guy like him. And like you said, with the Jets too, they could, snag him up at the top of, they could trade back into the first round or something like that if they don't want to pick him at 10. But I still think, him going at 10 is a reasonable outcome for the New York Jets. And, Cleveland could still pick him at 13. And some of these other teams, the Eagles could still pick him with one of their picks as well. Treylon Burks, I think he's well worth that pick. He's not my wide receiver one as it currently stands. And we'll have to see how my wide receiver one tests come April 5th when he holds his pro day. But I still think Treylon Burks is worth this pick.
Yeah, and let me just clarify, by the way, any of the 3 wide receivers I think are well worth this pick. But when I'm talking about my type of pet cat, when I'm talking about the type of player that I enjoy watching, I mean, Treylon Burks, he's just so much fun to watch. And again, if he lands in the right situation, in the right offensive system, like, this could be a perennial 1,300 yard type of wide receiver, 10 to 15 type of touchdowns, because he's just so hard to take down in the open field.
Yep, for sure. So let's move on to the 104. The guy I would have picked at 103 had I been making the pick, and that's Drake London, wide receiver from USC. Drake London is going to get the stupid stigma that all big wide receivers get, that he can't separate. He's N'Keal Harry. He's Cortland Sutton. He's, because some of these guys, Cortland Sutton had those concerns coming out of SMU as well. And he's, worked out, I would say, pretty fine in the NFL. Drake London does not separate the way that Garrett Wilson separates, and that's okay. He's not expected to. He's not the same size as Garrett Wilson. He's not, the same level of route runner as Garrett Wilson, and that is fine. As long as Drake London does not run 4.65 at his pro day or something really, really slow like that, I will have absolutely no concerns taking Drake London as a top 5 overall rookie pick and my top receiver in this class, because I think he is the top receiver for NFL teams. I think most likely he is the first receiver off the board. Todd McShay, Daniel Jeremiah, Mel Kiper, all these guys have him as a top 2 receiver in the class, and most of them actually have him as their wide receiver 1. I expect this dude to do exactly what he did at USC, to command targets at the highest level in this class, and it's really not all that close. This guy, when he was on the field, was commanding nearly 40% of his offense. Like, it was legitimately that high of the touchdowns, the percentage of targets, the percentage of their total receiving yards for USC. And this is a guy that produced at a very young age with Amon-Ra St. Brown and Michael Pittman Jr. commanding targets with him, albeit while not even playing football full time. He was on the basketball team as well up until this season. And if it wasn't for the injury, I think this is a guy that probably has a 1,500 yard, 15 touchdown junior season as a true junior at 20 years old. There's a guy at the combine, Velus Jones, who went to Tennessee. There is a bigger age gap between Velus Jones Jr. from Tennessee than there is, and Drake London, than there is between Najee Harris and Todd Gurley. Like, this is the extremely young wide receiver that produced at a very high level in a Power 5 conference. So no qualms whatsoever taking this guy 104.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple. I mean, this guy is a 2001. He's not even 21 years old yet. And this is a guy that was averaging 11 receptions per game last year, had 1,100 yards in 8 games, and produced a touchdown per game. I mean, from a pure analytical production standpoint, Drake London, by all accounts, with every single model you could imagine, is going to be that 101. It's going to be that first overall wide receiver. He's getting that hype from NFL draft circles. And the biggest misconception when it comes to Drake London, you mentioned it, but people are going to see the size. People are going to see 6'4", 220, and they're automatically going to think this is a third level deep threat only. Like, he can't do anything after the catch. He's stiff. He can't separate, yada, yada. That's all of Fugaz. That is completely all of Fugaz. I mean, this is a guy that is an elite athlete, because let's just contextualize this a little bit, right? He played fucking college basketball at USC and college football. He was a dual sport athlete at USC. You know how much that speaks to his athleticism, the fact that he was able to play basketball and football at USC. I know it's a narrative, if you will, but that already speaks to his athletic profile. You said, oh, the risk if he runs 4.65, if he tests out athletically. I'm sure no basketball team, no college basketball team, especially not USC, is going to take a guy that is that unathletic on their team. So that already dispels concerns about athleticism for me. And then when you talk about the production, when you talk about his actual tape, you mentioned he is a legitimate 3-level threat. Is he going to separate at all 3 phases like Garrett Wilson? No, he's not going to do that. He's not in the mold of Deontay Johnson. He's not in the mold of, a Stephon Diggs level separator. But can he go out, player X, and win at all 3 levels? Can he be Mike Evans? I think he can. And if you're getting, Mike Evans type of mold, if you will, at the 104 in your rookie drafts, that is a home run pick.
Yep, 100%. And I mean, we kind of already alluded to the other guy that we're probably going to see come off the board here at 105. Garrett Wilson, I'm assuming, is who you're going to call the pick in, wide receiver from Ohio State. For me, I'll just speak on him quickly. I only had 2 questions about Garrett Wilson coming into the combine. Now, one of them he didn't answer, which was his size. He came in under 190 pounds, which, I mean, is not ideal, but it's not, the end of the world. We've seen Deontay Johnson, Jalen Waddle, in recent years finish as wide receiver 1s in points per game without being over 190 pounds. The other question was his speed, which I think he absolutely answered the bell on. Running a 4.38 officially, running faster than Chris Olave was not expected out of Garrett Wilson at the combine.
Garrett Wilson this year, again, I hate making, historical narrative-y comps, but isn't this just like nearly identical situations to what was happening with Justin Jefferson a couple years ago? Like, genuinely, like, he's not the consensus one in his class. He's projected, to be an average athlete that goes out there and blows up the 40. Like, Garrett Wilson has elite tape, can separate at all 3 levels of the field, and just ran a 4.38 when everybody was expecting him to run closer to, late 4.4 type of range. Like
I
this
think that would have
is,
been a great time for him if he ran 4.48. I would have
you know
been
what I mean?
more than happy
Like
with. I was expecting him to run like 4.53.
that's what I'm saying. Like everybody expecting him to be at that 4.4, 4.5 type of range. This guy goes out and blazes out a 4.38. And we've talked about it a lot, but here's hoping he goes to like Cleveland or something. So, all the
Fall
NFL
to the
Twitter,
110 or something in rookie drafts. Yeah.
like genuinely, because I do think that, is he going to go out and explode fantasy football like Justin Jefferson? Probably not, but expecting anybody to do that is completely unrealistic. But can he be, Deontay Johnson? Can he be a consistent perennial like 1,100 yard receiver and be a number one wide receiver from an NFL team's perspective? I absolutely think he has that capability. Garrett Wilson is a stud, and if he's going outside of the top 5 rookie picks in your actual rookie drafts, consider it a steal. Walk it up to the bank and go cash in.
Yeah, I do think this is going to be the guy that slides for most people in rookie drafts. People are going to take, other running backs, maybe Kenneth Walker, maybe Isaiah Spiller, maybe other quarterbacks, maybe even other wide receivers ahead of Garrett Wilson. And he's probably going to fall to like 108, 109 in most rookie drafts. And I think this guy has a legitimate case to be the 101. Like, I actually do think Garrett Wilson, like we kind of already alluded to, he has less question marks than Treylon Burks and Drake London. The only question
Yep.
mark he has is that he's a little bit undersized, but that is really it. That is not like he has no other question marks for me from that perspective. He produced at a high level for a huge school with other elite competition. Jameson Williams, Chris Olave, Jackson Smith, and Jigba produced the highest level of all 4 of those guys that were eventually on that Ohio State roster. I mean, Jackson Smith and Jigba outproduced him this year, but that guy's also a kind of a freak as well.
Yeah.
Garrett Wilson, easy 105 for me if he's on the board in the board shaked out like this.
Yeah, well, like let's just talk about it right now. If you're more of a risk averse type of drafter, if you want to, make sure you hit the double or make sure you hit the triple, but you're not necessarily willing to swing on a home run and go out with a strike, Garrett Wilson's your guy. Like if you're picking at 101 and you want a guy that you can pretty much lock into top 15 overall wide receiver production really throughout his career, Garrett Wilson just screams that to me. He just seems like, can he be a top 5 wide receiver? He can. But the more likely outcome is he's going to be somewhere in that 5 to 15 range, maybe like an A+ version of what Terry McLaurin's been at the next level in terms
Or
of
DJ
production.
Moore or somebody like
DJ
that.
Moore in terms of production. And you're going to be completely happy with that.
Yep, for sure. And I think if you're getting that, and I think 105 is probably among the higher end of the spectrum of where you're going to see people rate Garrett Wilson. I think most people are going to have him 107 to 110 somewhere. And I think that's ludicrous. I think that's way too low for a guy that has done nothing but produce, nothing but test really well, nothing but, be a great prospect. And I think he's going to get overthought quite a bit. So at the 106, this is where I would say this top tier, I don't know if everybody's going to have it like this. Other, channels that you guys watch, other content creators that you have, this to me is the clear top tier. Whatever your team needs are, if you need a running back, you need a quarterback, I'm okay taking these Malik Willis and Breece Hall over these guys, given what I expect to happen. But this other guy, this 106 for me, is the only other player that can reach this tier,
I know
in my opinion, for me. And for me, it's Sam Howell, because Sam Howell is, in my opinion, a better prospect than what Malik Willis is. And the reason is because Sam Howell, not only does he present a better passing, baseline than what Malik Willis does, because I think Malik Willis needs a ton of work as a passer because mechanically he's not very sound. He's going to need to get with a good quarterback coach. Number 2, he's not very accurate. He doesn't have, the best mechanics when it comes to accuracy. He also, throws off his back foot all the time and stuff like that. That's all kind of, subjective type of things. But Sam Howell has good, mechanics. He played baseball growing up. You can clearly see he has like a baseball background when he throws the ball. He has good footwork. He has good mechanics. He does have, a tendency to short hop throws and overthrow some people from time to time. But the thing that Sam Howell has that nobody wants to talk about is he has, I don't want to say equal rushing upside to Malik Willis, but it is really close because Sam Howell ran for 1,100 yards this year. 1,100. Now, most, player profiler and sports references will have him listed as 878 yards, but that takes sack yardage off of his total rushing yards. So if we're talking about non-sack yard adjusted rushing yardage, which is what you get in the NFL, because the NFL doesn't do that, but the NCAA does for some reason, we're talking about a guy that just rushed for 1,100 rushing yards. And only Trey Lance, Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, and Deshaun Watson have ran, and Malik Willis obviously, have ran for over 1,000 yards and been a first-round pick, because Malik Willis will also be a first-round pick. The only question mark I have about Sam Howell is, where is he going to get drafted? Like, is he going to go in the first round? Is he going to go 25th? Is he going to go 30th? Is he going to go 32nd to the Lions? Is he going to go in the mid-second round? Is he going to go in the late second, early third round? I have no idea where this guy's going to get drafted. I think NFL teams are high on Sam Howell. We heard, throughout the entire broadcast of the Combine that, Ian Rappaport and Daniel Jeremiah was saying that some teams have this guy quarterback one, some teams have that guy quarterback one. It really all depends on preference. When you look at Sam Howell's 2020 tape, it is by far and away the best season any of these quarterbacks ever had in 1 year. It's really not all that close, in my opinion.
Well, if we're talking about it right now, could he be, as like a Patrick Mahomes level rusher in the NFL?
I think he's easily a better rusher than Patrick Mahomes.
But that's what I mean. And Mahomes was top 5 this year in terms of quarterback rushing yards. So if that's like the baseline for what we could see, people are really underrating the athleticism we're getting here with Sam Howell, the rushing opportunity, the rushing production we're getting with Sam Howell. And you kind of mentioned it, he's not getting hyped up in NFL draft circles like Malik Willis and Kenny Pickett. But straight off the bat, if we're comparing him to Kenny Pickett, Kenny Pickett's a good college prospect and is probably going to be a solid pro. But I don't want to say he's Mac Jonesy because he's definitely more athletic, but he's not the type of rusher that a Howell or Willis is. So if we're comparing them straight up, that's why we're taking Howell over Kenny Pickett, for those of you that are wondering. And when it comes to Sam Howell in terms of production, as long as he goes in the first round, talking about Tampa, talking about maybe the Saints, talking about, those back end, second half of the first round type of teams, he's going to be a top half of the first round rookie draft pick.
Exactly. And when you talk about just the combination that, think of the best rookie dynasty quarterbacks right now: Herbert, Mahomes, Allen. What is the combination that they all have in common? Now, I'm not saying that Sam Howell has the same level of arm talent and mobility and all these guys, but he threw 59 miles per hour on the velocity gun, which was the highest at the combine. So he has the strongest arm of anybody that threw there, and all of the quarterbacks threw, except for Matt Corral. He was the only one that didn't throw, and I can say definitively that he has a stronger arm than Matt Corral just based on what I've seen of those two quarterbacks. He has the strongest arm. He is the second most athletic behind Malik Willis. He has, better passing seasons than any of these guys on their resume, outside of maybe Kenny Pickett this season, but it's really close between those two guys. That combination, ceiling and floor kind of combination of those factors, I think makes Sam Howell as good of a prospect as any of these guys. And if Sam Howell goes in the mid first, back into the first round, and Malik Willis goes, 10th or 11th overall, it's going to be hard for me to take Malik Willis over Sam Howell in my overall rankings. But again, I don't know where Sam Howell is going to get drafted. Long-winded spiel on Sam Howell. That is, he is going to be the most underrated player in this first round mock draft. Most mock drafts probably won't even have him going in the first round, if I had to guess, in Superflex leagues. But you give me a quarterback that's mobile, that can, has great arm talent, has good college production, is still really, really young too, and is going to probably go in the first round. I'm taking that as a top 6 pick every day of the week.
For sure. Now again, obviously, I'm going to be back on the clock. For the record, we went through the first 6 picks a lot more in depth because, that's going to be the top of your first round. We'll try to speed it up for the second half of the first round because obviously a lot more of these guys are not going to be held in the same regard as those top guys. Makes sense. And either way, let's get into the 7th pick. And the decision here, in my opinion, is those expected high draft capital running backs for me. Kenny Pickett obviously has to be in the conversation because of his expected draft capital quarterback. But as I kind of mentioned, I don't necessarily see the quote unquote ceiling that I do out of Willis and Howell. So right off the bat, I'm not going to take Kenny Pickett, even though he's probably deserving of this spot. 107 is tough for me. I got my pre-combine tape of Isaiah Spiller being better than Kenneth Walker, but obviously Kenneth Walker projected as a really, really good athlete at the combine and should, as a result, see his draft capital really, really spike up because of that. I'm going to stick to my pre-combine bias, and that's going to be with Isaiah Spiller. You kind of talked about it, but the level of nuance for such a young running back with Isaiah Spiller is pretty remarkable. This guy's feet are tremendous, tremendous. Generally speaking, I don't like throwing out Le'Veon Bell here, but in terms of patience, in terms of vision, in terms of feet, Isaiah Spiller has it all. The problem that I'm going to have is what exactly are going to be his testing numbers? Is he going to meet NFL athleticism thresholds at the running back position? His vert was not good. I understand that. But again, I'm going to take the benefit of the doubt here. He wasn't feeling good. He hurt his hip abductor. He's going to retest at his Texas A&M program or pro day. From what I know
March
now,
22nd, by the way, that's the date that's actually happening.
From what I know now, from what I've seen on tape, I'm taking Isaiah Spiller because I personally thought his tape was the best in the class. But again, if he goes out on his pro day and doesn't meet NFL thresholds and his draft capital is expected to drop because of it, he's going to see himself drop from the 107.
Exactly. Yeah. If he goes out there and he runs 4.64 at a pro day, which is really bad because then, people are going to adjust that to like 4.69, then that's going to be a big time problem. But if he goes out there and he runs 4.49 in his pro day, 4.54, if you adjust that because he wasn't running at the combine, that's a fine time for him. Yep. He doesn't have the breakaway speed that either of those other two guys has, but what he does have is better receiving chops than both of them.
Yes.
And especially Walker, obviously, because Walker, didn't have any receiving production in college. And even if he can do it, we haven't seen it yet. So I don't want to, just assume that he can do that. And also between those two guys, he was also by far and away the best pass protector of those guys as well.
Easily.
And he's the most physical of those players, which is what he had on Hall for me on film. So that's kind of the Isaiah Spiller story. Again, I did an entire tail of the tape on him if you want to go watch him, because he was my running back one coming into the combine. But those two other guys tested way better than I thought. I thought they were going to be better athletes than Isaiah Spiller, but not much better.
If I'm drafting a running back in the top 7 of my rookie draft, I want them to have that 3-down profile, which I do think that if Spiller meets those thresholds, will meet.
Right. If you think about David Montgomery in the NFL, right, he has a 3-down workload. If Isaiah Spiller turns into David Montgomery, I think that's a huge win. Kenneth Walker might never have a 3-down workload. If he turns into Nick Chubb, has Nick Chubb outscored David Montgomery either the last 2 seasons? No. That's because fantasy production favors pass-catching running backs. So that's basically what we're talking about here. That's why we have Isaiah Spiller going at number 7. I would have picked the same player, but I will take Kenneth Walker with the next pick. And Kenneth Walker, obviously, the hallmarks and the benchmarks that I wanted to see from Kenneth Walker going into the combine was, A, don't do what Kyren Williams did. Don't be too small and run slow, because your draw as a fantasy running back is not because of your receiving, like Kyren Williams actually had that kind of to fall back on. He needed to be bigger than 205 pounds, which he checked that box, right? He came in 5'9", 211. That's really good, BMI for those of you guys that, believe in that. Then there's also the factor that a lot of Kenneth Walker's plays and big plays in college came from long breakaway runs. And if you come out and you run 4.53 at 5'9", 205, is that going to translate to the next level? Or is that something that makes you a really good college running back, but not necessarily a good NFL or fantasy running back? But 5'9", 211 pounds with 4.3 speed, that will freaking do. I will take that. That, really, really raised my view of Kenneth Walker. He was a guy that I was thinking as a 1-2 turn pick coming into the combine. Now I can see this guy having a case to go as high as 106, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I genuinely fully agree. The main question here, obviously, with the Tail of the Tape series, you kind of laid out the positives of the player, but then obviously posed the big question. Obviously, the big question with Kenneth Walker is, if a team takes him high in the second round of the NFL draft, do they envision him getting that full 3-down workload? Because I can say, given the athletic profile, if Kenneth Walker ended up developing into a 3-down workload type of player, the upside here is tremendous. It genuinely is. And again, there's been running backs in the past that haven't had great, college profiles of receiving that have done decent in the NFL. Jonathan Taylor's a decent example of that. But at least with Jonathan Taylor compared to Kenneth Walker, you saw that percentage of team market share in terms of the receiving from the running back position. And Kenneth Walker just wasn't commanding targets out of his own backfield. That's the main question we have here. And again, it is a flawed stack because there are some running backs, for example, Isaiah Spiller, who are battling with guys like Devon Achane, who are battling with other NFL caliber backs. You try to do that at Georgia, you're basically going to crucify yourself because it's just that hard to do. But when it comes to Kenneth Walker, the main question here, I know a long-winded sprint, but main question here, does he have 3-down capability?
We won't know until he gets drafted, really. Realistically, we won't know until he gets drafted, until we see him in preseason games and all that kind of stuff. But if he goes to a team like Miami, which I think is a great landing spot for him, wide zone type of scheme, I'd imagine they're going to use Myles Gaskin on 3rd down. I'm pretty sure that's how it's going to work. And could Kenneth Walker be a back-end RB1, high-end RB2 in fantasy his rookie season? Absolutely. But is he ever going to be a top 5 running back? If that happens, if he doesn't get that 3-down workload, that is why he's the 108 here. Because even if Isaiah Spiller is not quite the athlete of Kenneth Walker and Breece Hall, David Montgomery has finished as a top 5 running back. We've seen guys that have full workloads finish as top 5 guys simply by the fact that they have full workloads. So on paper, guys with Isaiah Spiller's receiving production profile versus guys with Kenneth Walker's receiving production profile, sure, Kenneth Walker could be the exception to the rule. Maybe year 2, year 3 of his NFL career, he develops a receiving workload, but he would be, one of 10 out of 100 running backs or so to do that versus a guy like Spiller, who'd be one of 85 out of 100 running backs to do what he did. coming over from his college production profile. Again, generally speaking, guys who are good receivers in college become good receivers in the NFL. It's not a hard and fast rule. It's not a certainty, but it is the best chance of success for receiving back in the NFL.
For sure. So, I mean, transitioning off of Walker, it's pretty simple at this point. I'm not touching another running back at least until the early to mid second round because I do think that the top three have kind of separated themselves this year. Now I'm looking at the quarterbacks and I'm looking at the wide receivers because there's no Kyle Pitts, there's no, Pat Fryermuth level prospect this year, in my opinion, at tight end. And when I'm narrowing it down to quarterbacks and wide receivers, the main two names that really jump out to me are going to be Jamison Williams, wide receiver from Alabama, and are going to be Kenny Pickett, quarterback from Pitt. If Jamison Williams is coming into this draft with no medical concerns, he came out against Georgia, balled out, expected top 20 pick and everything there, he would have been my pick, and he probably would have went a decent bit higher in this mock draft if that were to happen. However, you do have a lot of concerns there in terms of how exactly is it going to affect his face planner status, for example. If he goes out and he's not ready to start, training camp, he's late to training camp, he's dealing with that injury, still dealing with the repercussions, and he goes out and doesn't have the most productive year one rookie year, he could end up being in that face planner category, which we definitely don't want to bet on over a sure thing quarterback in Kenny Pickett. Do I still like Jamison Williams? Absolutely. Do I still think he's well worth a first round rookie mock draft pick or rookie draft pick? Absolutely. But taking him over Kenny Pickett at this point, who, yeah, he's not Mac Jones level of immobility, but he's not going to be, Willis or Howell. I can't do it. When you're talking about Kenny Pickett, there's an expected top 15 overall pick at the quarterback position. Should land in a good landing spot. You mentioned, Denver, Washington, maybe Pittsburgh, like as the potential spots we could see for Kenny Pickett. New Orleans, as the potential spots we can see for Kenny Pickett. Do I think he's going to go out and have a top 5 level ceiling that Howell and Willis do? No. But if you're telling me this guy can carve out, a Kirk Cousins level career where he's always ranging between like quarterback 10 and quarterback like 17, getting him here at the 109 is well worth the pick. So I would rather that sure thing at this point in the draft over the concerns with the knee that I have over Jamison Williams.
I think his ceiling might be a bit higher than a guy like Kirk Cousins. I think if you wanted to say he has like a Tannehill level ceiling, I would say that's probably about accurate for a guy like Kenny Pickett. But yeah, like we kind of already touched on with Howell and Willis, I think those guys, their rushing ability is going to translate. And I know it's been a question mark for Howell, but I think he has a better rushing, profile than what Kenny Pickett has. Because while Kenny Pickett ran like a 4.67, which is a really good time for a quarterback, Sam Howell rushed for over 1,100 yards. Like that is just a way more predictive metric going forward than a guy's 40 time, for example, because, Josh Allen only ran like a 4.76 at the combine, and he is a true rushing threat at the next level. So the 40 time is helpful. It's definitely encouraging, but it's not, the end all be all of like a mobile quarterback all of a sudden. So team 10, the 10th overall pick, I got a number of different, ways I could go with this pick. Obviously, Matt Corral is a guy that I could definitely go with. He's kind of been out of sight, out of mind because he got injured in his bowl game, hasn't really done a whole lot of testing. He didn't go to the Senior Bowl like the other quarterbacks. He didn't throw at the combine, didn't do any, athletic drills. He's going to have the Ole Miss Pro Day, I believe, is like March 27th or something. So he's going to have his full workout, run all the drills, do all of his, throwing and stuff. He's a guy that is definitely well worth this pick. But I'm going to go a little bit off the board. I'm going to take Chris Olave, who I think is the next best receiver for me. I know Jamison Williams, is probably the guy that you would go with, but I'm going to go with Chris Olave, who I think I watched a couple games of this morning, tested really well, has good production at a big, school that played a lot of high level competition, lit up Clemson in the Sugar Bowl 2 years ago. I think Chris Olave is a little bit of a safer player than what Jamison Williams presents because of the injury and because of, the fact that he could be delayed coming into his rookie season.
Yeah, I quickly wanted to talk about that Sugar game because, man, I still have that flashback of that Justin Fields throw to the end zone in my head as soon as you mentioned that. But Chris Olave is a fantastic pick here. And I mentioned Jamison Williams, but the other receiver I was really considering would have been Chris Olave. I mean, this guy's just kind of gone under the radar. We've talked about Garrett Wilson. We talked about Jackson Smith-Jigba. And people just kind of are tired of talking about Chris Olave's name. Like, this was genuinely a guy that was thought of as a fringe top 5 level wide receiver last year, going into his first year eligible for the draft. He could have committed last year and been a top 40 type of pick. Like, I genuinely saw from most NFL circles, like him and Elijah Moore were kind of thought of, as that second tier of wide receiver.
And, those guys as well.
Yeah, so I mean, people are going to talk about the fact that he stayed back for his senior year and he wasn't an early declare, and I get that from an analytical standpoint that it does matter in terms of being able to evaluate those buckets of comparable players. But with Chris Olave, the context here is he was a really good prospect last year. He came back to this team this year thinking that he had a chance to maybe make the college football playoff, maybe win a national championship, and he's still the same player that he was coming out of last year. Like, this is just prospect fatigue at this point if he's not going in the first round of anybody's rookie mocks, in my opinion. This is a really good wide receiver that is going to get round one draft capital, that is a plus level athlete that has been producing in the Big Ten for the last 3 years. There's nothing that really Chris Olave doesn't meet from a checkpoint standpoint. It's just going to depend on what your thoughts of him are compared to this Jameson Williams, George Pickens, Jahan Dotson type of tier. But for my money, I mean, Chris Olave and Jameson Williams are the standout names out of that, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think if we do the next tier of wide receivers, they'd be the first two names that I would come up with personally. So yeah, Chris Olave for me at 110 is the guy that I would go with. You said first round draft capital. I think there's a legitimate chance that Chris Olave goes off the board before one of the other three wide receivers that we already talked about. It would not surprise me if an NFL team took Chris Olave before they took Treylon Burks or before they took, Garrett Wilson or Drake London or something, because I mean, we heard it throughout the entirety of the combine that, teams like Tennessee and like the Chargers and stuff have been like commonly linked to a guy like Chris Olave. And if Chris Olave goes 17 to the Chargers and you can get him at 110 in your rookie draft, that is a phenomenal, phenomenal pick.
Well, I wanted to quickly mention, would you be at all shocked if Cleveland took Olave 13th overall?
I wouldn't, but I think that's a bad pick. If Garrett Wilson went 10 to the Jets or something and Garrett Wilson was their guy or something and they picked, Olave over London or Burks, honestly, it wouldn't shock me.
For sure. But I genuinely see that it could be a case in the NFL draft. But either way, I mean, Chris Olave is really good, should get good draft capital. I mean, getting him at the back end of the first round is basically just printing money. But let's get into the next pick. And it's the other receiver I mentioned at the Kenny Pickett pick. But I'm taking Jameson Williams here. And it's pretty simple to me. People are going to point out the fact that, why would you ever consider Jameson Williams over either the Ohio State wide receivers when he couldn't get any playing time against them? And I fully get that. People are going to have those question marks. Why didn't he produce going into this year? That's going to affect his analytical grade nonetheless. What I watched this year as a player at Alabama, as an Alabama Crimson Tide wide receiver, Jameson Williams in 80-90% of his games was the most dynamic player in the game that he played. Genuinely speaking, if the ball was in his hands and he was working as a legitimate 3-level threat, talking about after the catch, talking about deep threat, talking about you name it, working at all 3 levels of the field, Jameson Williams was producing. His first year playing with Bryce Young, this was a guy that was able to put up nearly 1,600 yards and over 10 touchdowns. He is a big play waiting to happen. And my comp for him, as I kind of mentioned earlier, as I kind of alluded to earlier, was a taller version of what Marquise Brown has kind of been at the next level. And people are both going to, drag on the analytical profiles of Marquise Brown and Jameson Williams. But Marquise Brown, by all accounts, has been able to come out, translate, and command targets at the next level. And in the right situation, talking about, maybe Tampa at 27, maybe Dallas takes him at 24, Buffalo. Chargers 17, Buffalo. There's so many good teams that are plausible, draft capital, realistic type of landing spots for Jameson Williams that could ultimately, I don't think his value range could vault really past, 107, 108. But if he landed in any of those situations, we're looking at a long-term, like top 20 level dynasty wide receiver if that were to happen.
Yeah, I definitely don't disagree. If he goes to the Chargers or the Bills, I think he's going to go off the board somewhere from 5 to 8 in most rookie drafts. So I do think he definitely has that kind of ceiling. This 112 pick, I kind of want to get spicy with it. I could just go with the boring one and go with Matt Corral just because he's a quarterback, but I'm actually going to take somebody else. So the reason I'm not taking Matt Corral is for a couple of reasons. Number one, Matt Corral, we haven't seen a whole lot in the offseason schedule for quarterbacks, which doesn't mean anything to us as, fantasy players, but what it will mean is to NFL teams and where they draft him. So the fact that Matt Corral was not at the Senior Bowl, I believe he's a junior, so he can't go anyway. But the fact that he wasn't, working out at the combine, that might ding his draft capital a little bit. It might force some teams to value, Malik Willis and Kenny Pickett and Sam Howell, maybe even Desmond Ridder over a guy like Matt Corral. So I'm not going to pick him for that reason. And also because he doesn't have the physical tools of some of these other quarterbacks. And also he played in a scheme Unlike Sam Howell, who had, an
Oh.
11.5 average depth of target, Matt Corral was up near like 9. Like he's a guy that was, running a little bit of an RPO scheme, a little bit less dynamic type of throws that he was going to be seeing in college comparatively to some of these other guys who played in, more downfield passing and stuff like that. So Matt Corral is not who I'm going with at 112. The guy who I'm going with at 112 is a guy that probably has made more money in the last 2 months than any other receiver in this draft class. And that is Christian Watson, wide receiver from North Dakota State. Christian Watson, mark my words, will be drafted in the first round of the NFL draft. I don't know, who's going to pick him. I think Detroit at 32 makes a ton of sense. I think, Tampa is going to like him, just knowing what I know about my own team and my, general manager and my coaching staff. I think they're going to like him at 27. Buffalo potentially will like him, even maybe as high as the Chargers might like him. What has Christian Watson need to do to go in the first round? Seriously. Like he's a 6'4", 210-pound wide receiver that ran 4.36 officially. His math bomb score, I'll show it on the screen right now, is among the likes of Calvin Johnson and Chase Claypool and some of the best wide receiver athletes that we've seen in the last 15 years. This is a dude that's going to get drafted highly. The only question mark he has is the school that he went to and the competition that he produced among, and produced at a high level. 90th percentile college dominator rating, breakout age a little bit less so, but when you saw him producing with Trey Lance on the field, you could tell that this is an NFL caliber wide receiver, and he looked out of place among the competition that he was playing against. All he did was, by all accounts, be the single best receiver at the Senior Bowl. It wasn't even close. The NFL, the way that NFL teams were talking about this guy, put up a historic combine, going to get drafted highly. I think this is a guy that is going to fall probably to the late first, early second round of rookie drafts. And it would not shock me if we look back 2 years from now and we're like, how the hell was Christian Watson not a top 8 pick?
Well, it's funny because, again, like I'm just looking at the main thing that people are going to point out here is, he only had 43 receptions this year. He had 800 yards, without contextualizing the fact that this offense, this passing offense, in 13 games played, had 2,200 passing yards and 20 passing touchdowns. Watson, in 12 games played, accounted for 800 receiving yards and 7 receiving touchdowns. Like, people like saying, I want guys that are productive, yada, yada, yada. He didn't have 1,000 yards. This passing offense completely revolved through Christian Watson. And again, he's an older prospect without 1,000 yards under his belt in the season. And you don't know because he's a small school guy. But listen, at the end of the day here, teams are going to see how much he demanded production in his offense. They're going to see the height. They're going to see the athleticism. And they're going to think, this is a locked and loaded, top 40 type of NFL pick. And if he goes, I think Tampa Bay at 27, as you mentioned, would be a really good spot for him.
I think 32 to Detroit makes perfect sense.
I think Buffalo could take him at 25. Like, I genuinely think that the guys that we personally would have in quote unquote higher regard is held in similar regard for a lot of NFL teams when it comes to Christian Watson. Like, I genuinely think like teams are going to go into the NFL draft and view, Watson, Jameson Williams, like guys like that at the top of the second round type of area, George Pickens, all in that same type of clump. And if it went out in draft day and the team drafted Christian Watson in the top 25, I wouldn't be shocked.
Yep, I would not either. So if you guys, did enjoy this video, some of the guys I'll just quickly mention that could have been this 112, like I said, Matt Corral already. We have George Pickens, who tested pretty well. We have David Bell, who didn't test the greatest, but I think his film is worthy of this area of the draft. We have Tyler Algier and, Rachaad White, the next 2 running backs, I think probably off the board for most people, at least, in my opinion. And they would be kind of, worthy of consideration at the start of the second round. You also have Desmond Ridder, who by all accounts might go a little bit higher in the draft than we're thinking. I know a lot of people weren't the biggest fans of Desmond Ritter's tape, but NFL teams seem to like him, and he tested very well. He's very mobile, and we all know that you don't necessarily need to be the best quarterback in the world from an NFL perspective to be a good fantasy quarterback. So if he goes at the top of the second round to the Atlanta Falcons to sit behind Matt Ryan for a year and, play in 2023, then he's going to be a guy worthy of an early second round pick, in my opinion, similar to what we saw with Jalen Hurts a couple years ago.
Yeah, and like, again, some of the receivers you mentioned, Bell, Pickens, obviously, I don't think the knee's much of a concern anymore, considering the fact that this guy was able to return to play in the national championship and went out and ran I think it was 4.43?
4.47 officially. And then we also have Justin Ross, who is also a kind of a health question mark. He's going to test about a week from now, actually, at Clemson's Pro Days on March 17th. So we're going to see him test. He came in at a very, very good size when he weighed in at. So he's somebody I'm very interested to see how he tests, because we all know what he did as a freshman. And then obviously the injuries kind of took over from there. Jahan Dotson didn't run the greatest 3-cone in the world, but he was, fast, a little bit undersized. So some question marks about him, but I do think he's going really high in the NFL draft as well. And then Sky Moore made himself a lot of money at the combine as well.
Sky Moore, I mean, we mentioned Christian Watson as being a guy that has helped himself a lot during the offseason cycle, but Sky Moore's another one. I mean, this guy went out, blazes 40 and 4.41, high producer in college, meets the athleticism thresholds, really good tape, projected to go a lot higher than a lot of people had thought coming into the cycle. Like I generally see guys like Dane Brugler, guys like Jeff Kavanaugh, Daniel Jeremiah.
Daniel Jeremiah tweeted that he's not going to make it out of the second round in the NFL draft. He's like, he is a lock to go in the top 64 picks, is basically what he said. So I'm going to trust him. He knows what NFL teams are thinking. He knows how they behave. And I believe Sky Moore went to the same school as Dwayne Eskridge, right? So NFL teams are already used to going to this school and making a receiver from this school a second round pick, and one who has a much better profile than what Dwayne Eskridge had last year.
Oh, yeah, no, their profiles are not even close, to be quite honest. I mean, this guy was able to command targets as a true freshman. 2019 had an 800-yard receiving season, despite playing with Dwayne Eskridge. I mean, Sky Moore, from an actual prospect standpoint, is so far out of Dwayne Eskridge's league as a prospect. Like, we're comparing, a 24-year-old Dwayne Eskridge to an actual, young, talented receiving prospect that Sky Moore is. Sorry if you're a Dwayne Eskridge truther. I didn't want to shit on him too hard, but I mean, Sky Moore's a lot better. Another guy, if he went in the first round, if he went in the top 40, I wouldn't be at all shocked.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't either. And then a few other names, and then we'll get out of here. We got Brian Robinson, tested pretty well. I think NFL teams are going to draft him high. I'm not necessarily saying you should draft him high, but I think he's going to go with good draft capital. Zamir White from Georgia made himself a lot of money probably this week as well. He could sneak his way into day 2. I really liked Bam Knight from NC State. He didn't really test the greatest, but a name to keep an eye on as you get into the second round, late second round, early third round type of range. So if you guys did enjoy this video, again, sorry for making it a little bit long. Danny's still dealing with some mic question marks. He will be back and ready to go in the next couple days. But if you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, comment any of your thoughts down below. Who's your favorite pick of the round? Who are we too low on? Who are we too high on? Etc. I'm sure a lot of you guys are going to be in the comments saying, how could you take Isaiah Spiller over Kenneth Walker? I know it's probably going to happen. We hopefully explained why we were doing that to a good degree. But if you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button as well. We have tons of rookie content. We're actually in the process of updating our Dynasty Rankings manifesto. We're going to be adding in rookies in the next couple of weeks. So if you want to access that, that is available on Patreon. You can check out all of the Patreon benefits as well on there. And I will also be curating a spreadsheet basically outlining all of the metrics and the testing numbers for all of the positions. So if you're interested, where can I find a spreadsheet that lists everything from all the relevant fantasy prospects? I will have that available in the Patreon in the next coming days as well. So without further ado, guys, peace out. We'll talk to you soon.